Okay, hi. Thanks everyone for coming. My name's Elonka Dunin. I've been coming to PhreakNIC here for several years, off and on. PhreakNIC I kind of see as my home conference because if it weren't for PhreakNIC, a lot of other good things in my life would not have happened. Right now I'm a published author. I'm on the board of directors to build a new National Museum of Cryptography. I've hung out with Dan Brown. He actually named a character after me in one of his novels. And that all kind of traces back to PhreakNIC and cracking the codes here. How many people here have heard me speak before, either at PhreakNIC or somewhere else? Okay. So I'll tell a little bit of that story. Johnny X, organizer here, he had created a code, and this was way before all the other stuff happened, but he had created a code for PhreakNIC 3, which had not been cracked. And I heard about it at DragonCon, where I was speaking on electronics and games. That's my day job, is I make computer games. And I heard about the PhreakNIC 3 code at DragonCon, picked it up with all the other flyers, took it home, heard there was a prize, and I cracked the code. And I won the prize, which was a free trip to a HackerCon, free hotel, drinks, t-shirts, all that good stuff. And then I went around cracking a bunch of other codes in the hacker scene. I've actually been banned from competition at this point. At the AtlantaCon convention, when they released their code, at the bottom of the paper it said, "No, past puzzle crackers are ineligible for prizes associated with solving the AtlantaCon puzzle. Give someone else a chance, Elonka." So I cracked that one too. And then September 11th happened, and I was using some of my cryptography skills to help out with the war on terrorism, and I was giving talks about what kind of codes that Al-Qaeda was using, including steganography, or the rumors about Al-Qaeda using steganography and how I don't believe they were using steganography. And then through the PhreakNIC 3 code, I also heard about this sculpture at CIA called Kryptos, which is a challenge to the employees of the CIA. There's 4 codes on it, 3 of the 4 have been solved. 4th has not been solved yet. It's one of the world's most famous unsolved codes. And I became very knowledgeable about Kryptos, and so that started drawing attention. And Dan Brown, the author, Da Vinci Code author, had Kryptos as a theme in one of his novels, and in a couple of his novels, and so he would call upon me and ask me questions, and I'd tell him the answers, and then he would ignore the answers and go and write whatever the heck he was going to go write. Then he thanked me by naming a character after me in one of his novels, and so it just all kind of snowballed, and it really kind of started here at PhreakNIC. So I didn't know I was going to speak here a week ago. It just kind of came in last minute, and I said, "Do you want me to come in? Do you want me to speak?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Here's a list of everything that I can speak about." And Will Biggs said, "Location-based games." I'm like, okay, so here's my talk on location-based games. This is one of my current passions right now. As I said, my day job is I make computer games, and I'm always interested in new genres of games. I can quickly look at a game, and you can break it down into the basics of what kind of game is it. Is it a first-person shooter? Is it real-time strategy? Is it a puzzle game, match 3, classic game? And this genre of location-based games just fascinates me because 100 years ago, we really didn't obviously have the technology to do this. In fact, we really didn't have the technology to do this about 15 years ago. There were satellites going around that were beaming location, but the location was primarily for military targets. And the civilians were allowed to get the signals, but things were going to be offset by a large amount. But then that all changed in May 2000 when President Clinton signed the order ending what was called selective availability. And when that ended, it meant that even civilians with our little GPS receivers, we could get very accurate location as well. Accurate meaning still, 20, 30, 40 feet, kind of depending, but much more accurate than it was before. Well, within about 24 hours of selective availability being turned off, a game had started. Somebody went into the woods in Oregon with a box. I think it was actually a bucket. This was a guy named Dave Ulmer, and it had some toys in it, and I think a videotape, and he went out there and he got the latitude and longitude, and then he went back and he posted these coordinates online and said, "Can you find it?" And very rapidly, they realized that they had a really, really fun game, and people started placing caches all over the world. Since May 2000, when this started, there's now over 2 million geocaches that are hidden. There's over 5 million people playing the game of geocaching. Now there's other location-based games that are around as well. Geocaching was not the first, but I'll be going over many of the different games, going from big ones such as geocaching, letterboxing, to some of the more modern ones. Google Ingress, I know, is very popular around here right now. How many people here play Ingress? Just curiosity, okay. How many people here are geocachers? Okay, all right, awesome, awesome. How about letterboxers? Okay. Does anyone else like really identify with one of these and saying, I play that game, that this is part of my lifestyle?
Yeah, I played a lot of Zombies Run.
Zombies Run, okay. I'd be interested in hearing, feel free to add, when I'm talking about Zombies Run. Anybody else? Saw a hand go up in the back. Okay, all right. Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself here. So, all of these I call location-based games, which means that where you are physically matters in the game. So it's not like you can be playing Nintendo DS somewhere, and it really doesn't matter if you're playing in Hawaii or playing in Arizona, you're still playing the same game. These games, it depends where you are, and often, and in some games, it depends how fast you are moving at the time. Zombies Run, I think the exact location doesn't matter so much as that you're moving at the time that yeah, and so I enjoy playing Zombies Run is a game that tells a story. And you put it on your smartphone, and it ties into your music, and it's almost like a DJ. It'll play a song, and it'll tell you a little bit of a story, and it'll play a song and tell you a little bit of a story. And in the story, the world is overrun by zombies, and every so often zombies start chasing you, and it sort of incentivizes you to run a little faster because the zombies are chasing. And you'll hear it as like beeps, beep, 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 and then you want to run, because if the zombies catch you, then you lose gear and other things. Is that kind of pretty accurate? Yeah, and there's different chapters. Each chapter is about an hour long, but you can get the main part of the story, or just go on, and then it kind of just goes into a banter mode, sort of what they call radio mode in Zombies Run. Okay, but I'll be going into more of that. So the earliest location-based game really does predate the satellites, and that would be letterboxing, and that kind of started in England in the 1800s. Obviously, they didn't have the exact latitude and longitude from satellites, but they would do it with clues, and they would say something like, start at the stable, proceed 1 mile along the stream, look for the tree of the Three Sister Tree, which would mean a tree that had maybe 3 trunks that were twined together. And also with letterboxing there would normally be some artwork involved, such as a rubber stamp. So when you found the letterbox, and it varies from area to area, so not all letterboxes are like this, but in the United States now, letterboxing involves a rubber stamp. You get there and there's a hand-carved stamp that you use to stamp your book to prove that you've been to that letterbox. And you have your own personal stamp that you've hand-carved, some people buy them at stores, that you then use to stamp the book that's in the letterbox to prove that you were there. And once you find a box and you've done the stamps, and then you put the box back wherever it was, and then you go on and find another box or find a geocache. A geocache is generally pretty similar. You go somewhere, you have latitude and longitude coordinates. You try to find this cache. They're never buried. They're always above ground, but sometimes they can be camouflaged. And once you find it, inside this box will usually be a logbook that you sign. You put your name, you can use a pseudonym, you put the date that you found it, and then you put the logbook back in the cache and you put it back. There's usually also some toys involved in the larger caches. Now, children love geocaching. The rule is that they're allowed to take a toy from a geocache as long as they put something back in that's of equal or greater value. Trade even or trade up is the general rule. Caches are generally going to be, shoebox size, ammo can size, but they can be very small. They can be the size of a pill bottle. They're often pill bottles. They can be tiny. They can be like the size of a thimble and with a magnet on them, and it can be tucked to a fence post somewhere.
I've also seen some so-called virtual ones where you have to
Are we recording this microphone? Okay, sorry, go ahead.
I've seen some so-called virtual ones where you have to mail the person who... I've seen some so-called virtual caches where you have to answer a riddle and email the answer to the person that left it. It's usually having to do with a sign of some sort. You have to answer some questions of what was on the sign.
Yeah, but geocaches, there's several different types, and letterboxing, I should have mentioned, often did include some sort of a message. When it was in England, people would leave a letter in these boxes, and then periodically someone would come in and collect all of the letters and then actually send them to their designated targets. In England, they're letterboxing a bit differently than they are in the United States, so this idea of leaving a letter doesn't really happen as much in the States. In the States, it's really kind of distilled down to just having the rubber stamp, but with geocaches, we definitely have virtuals. I was just geocaching earlier today, and I was trying to find as many different types of geocaches as I could, but I'll go into that. I want to get away from letterboxing and geocaching, talk briefly about Zombies Run. It was a Kickstarter project. It started in late 2011, opened, and it's had about 500,000 downloads so far. Their motto: "Get fit, escape zombies, become a hero," and it's fun. I'm not a runner, but I find that I'll play it while I'm in my car, and that way I always know I can outrun the zombies because I'm going at 50 miles an hour. But it's a fun story. They got some really I cheat, yeah. But it's a fun story, and they got some really good voice actors that are talking about what's going on, and there's this kind of ongoing mysterious story because you don't quite know what's going on in the world. So, do you want to talk a little bit about why you like it, or how did you hear about it, or?
I mean, I think you covered it mostly. It's more interesting than running along and not listening to anything, and the interactivity is fun.
So about how often do you play it, would you say?
Not often. I mostly listen to audiobooks, so once or twice a week.
Okay. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I find that when I'm on a long drive, it's great. It's sort of like a podcast, but
Yeah.
it's zombies, and that little thing of, okay, run, and then you've got a song playing, and I'm kind of visualizing the zombies are lurching after me, and it goes, the song finishes, and then I hear more about the story. So, yeah, it's an interesting idea. Foursquare, if anyone, I know there's people at PhreakNIC that have played Foursquare. This idea of people wanting to check in at different locations, and if you check in more than anyone else, you can kind of become mayor. So it's a very, very basic gameplay. Some people might not even call it a game, but I think it's an entertainment. And it's kind of interesting, especially in the hacker scene, because people are very privacy oriented, and you don't want the government watching you. You don't want anybody to know where you are, what you're doing. But with location-based games, you do want people to know like exactly where you are, and you want the location to be as precise as possible. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy. Foursquare's got millions of check-ins every day. There's a lot of people playing it. Facebook and also is starting to get in on some of this, not with the mayor, but when you check in on Facebook, you can say where you are or what you're doing. So people like the world, in general, they like the world to know where they are. It's just something very human there. Ingress. So this has got Google behind it. It's still in closed beta, last I heard, and but it started in late 2012. Massive backstory going on, but in a nutshell, imagine that augmented reality, all around us are little specks of energy that are floating called XM, exotic matter. But you can only see them if you have your phone with you. And I have an iPhone, but it's an Android game. And so you need your Android device to see where these bits of energy are. And if you see something near you, you can walk towards it with the phone and you collect that energy. And your health bar sort of goes up. As your energy and health goes up, you can also go to areas where this energy is emanating from, which are called portals. And these portals, and then you get into this combat kind of game, because a portal can be either unclaimed or it can belong to one of two factions, blue being resistance or green being enlightened. And, Sorry? Yeah. And I was going to ask what color teams people are on, but I didn't want to start a fight. It's a very dynamic game. People really, really get into it. This is an example of a screenshot. This is from Green. So you can see the various portals and the little bits of energy that are floating around. Once you get to a portal, you can do basic things. You can hack it. Hack it means you're kind of touching it and saying, give me stuff. The stuff might be defensive items, offensive items, keys. You can link portals together, and if you can link 3 portals together of your color, you make a field. And people all over the world, there's been about a million downloads of this app. People are competing to see how big a field they can make. And there's regular news reports like blue resistance has put a field over Italy. Italy is covered by blue. Or there was an interesting field that came up in the Middle East that was linking, I think, Lebanon and Israel, which was especially interesting because the border was closed, so people couldn't get across the border to swap keys, but somehow they managed to swap keys so that they could create this field. In Canada, they did some interesting artwork with fields where they made a picture of a maple leaf in a Canadian city where half of the lines were blue and half were green. So the two, what's called a cross-faction project, they work together. It can get really, really aggressive. As you attack a portal, you take it over, and sometimes you'll be in a town where like nothing's going on and people will just leave that portal alone and it's your color until it kind of degrades after about a week or so. And sometimes that portal will flip in minutes. It depends on the people who are playing the game in that particular area. I was playing in southern New York State at one point, and I was just traveling. I was geocaching through the area, and I checked into a hotel, and I thought, oh, okay, there's a portal near the hotel. I'm going to go, flip it over to my color before I go to bed. And so I went out there, and I'm low level, so I'm like attack. And then as I'm attacking, I realized that instead of going down in energy, it's going up in energy. And okay, there's somebody else around here, and they have to be fairly close usually. They were placing resonators, so it wasn't just a recharge. So I look around, and empty field there, empty field there. There's nobody standing, and I'm like, okay, is somebody cheating? Somebody spoofing their location? I'm like, okay. And then I saw a car drive by, and I'm like, okay, so somebody's doing a drive-by and is defending the portal in this area. I'm like, okay. If they're going to be that, defensive about it, okay. And so I got in my car and I drove away, and they followed me. So they were so into protecting their territory.
There's a price to pay.
I don't know does anyone else have a story about playing with
A
Red?
quick story.
Sure.
I was coming home from 2600 about 3 months ago after planning some stuff for this conference. And we went and saw a movie after. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I live here in Murfreesboro. And I stopped at the local cemetery, which has a lot of portals in it because of the monuments. And so I'm driving around the cemetery very slow when the blue lights come on behind me.
Okay.
And the officer walks up and asks me what I'm doing. And I didn't say the word blowing up portals. But I just said, I'm playing a game on my phone. It's using historical landmarks, and it's no big deal. And he said, oh, like geocaching. And so I was surprised that apparently law enforcement is aware as well.
Some of them are, some of them aren't.
He asked me to get out of the car, and if I'd been drinking, and when I said that, I was like, no, you're fine. Keep doing what you're doing. And he left me alone after that. But it was, they can get you into trouble if you're in weird places. So it does look suspicious.
Yeah, I was, different people play it in different ways. Portals are generally going to be at something that's interesting, a sculpture or something historical, though people can now submit portals in an area, and some of them are submitting portals that maybe shouldn't be portals, like if somebody has a garden gnome in his garden and he submitted it as a portal so he could have something that he could get at from his couch. But yeah, portals are generally going to be in historic areas, and I live in St. Charles, Missouri, which used to be the capital of Missouri, like Murfreesboro used to be the capital of Tennessee, I believe. And so there's a lot of historic buildings all around the area. And my favorite way to play, and this is not but I like it when it's quiet. I like it when there's no opposition. So it might be like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm going out. Usually means there's no opposition, though I do know people that have set their phones that if one of their portals is being attacked, their phone will buzz. And I know people that at 2 o'clock in the morning, if their phone buzzes, they will get out of bed and get in the car and go defend the portal. That's yeah. And they're like, yeah, what's the problem? Yeah, that's the way they play. Me, I turn notifications off. Once I attack a portal, if somebody else wants to take it, that's fine. But it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm having a good time. I'm driving up and down the St. Charles riverfront, and I pull up, and I'm attacking a portal, and go up and attack a portal, and I'm out of energy, so I gotta circle around, pick up some more XM. Blue lights go on behind me, it's a cop, wanting to know, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm beta testing a new Google mapping, and they're like, because you're like, stop and start and stop and start. And what are you doing? It looks like I'm drunk, that I'm just kind of wandering around this parking lot. But yeah, I've gotten pulled over 2 or 3 times. Anyone else have an ingress story that they wanted to share? Oh, yeah. Okay.
I haven't played much, but the first time I ever went out and played, kind of the same experience you had with the drive-by. There were like 2 of us, and we had just finished placing, I don't know, however many resonators it is you have to place around a
8
portal to capture it. And all of a sudden, this car drives by at about 30 miles an hour and destroys all of them.
Yeah.
And it was just someone who was like level 8 after the game's been out for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I should say that there's an interesting collaborative aspect. Each portal has 8 resonators, and a portal has a level, and the level will be dependent on the level of the people who have placed those resonators. So at level 1, you can only place level 1 resonators, 2 can place 2, and on up. But the higher level the resonator, the fewer that you can place on a portal. So when you're a level 8 player, you can only place 1 resonator of level 8, and then others of lower levels. So to get a portal to level 8, though, it needs 8 level 8 resonators, which means you need 8 players, each of whom is touching that portal, putting a resonator on it. Level 8 players are really powerful. Your weapons can attack farther, they can hit harder. And I know a lot of people who do these drive-bys where they'll just go through an area and they've got a whole setup in their car. They've got the steering wheel, they've got a mount for the phone. Yeah, and sometimes they can set it to auto attack, boom, 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 and they're just driving through. And I'm amazed that there aren't more car accidents from Ingress players, because it's texting while driving, really. But no, I'm not texting, I'm attacking. But yeah, it's the way the game is designed is you're constantly harvesting new material off of portals. You're constantly looking for new portals to attack and setting up links and fields. And, yeah. Any other Ingress stories?
Come on, Dagmar.
Is Dagmar here?
Oh yeah, he's right there.
Oh, there he is in the back. Give us a story.
He's got some very interesting stories.
It brings out the worst of some of these trailer trash assholes.
Yeah.
Tell about the daycare across the street from the portal.
Give the mic. Someone get the mic for Dagmar.
Was it a daycare or a school across the street from the portal you kept hacking, and the parents were wondering what you were doing and they were suspicious of you?
No, I was just out late at night doing shifty stuff. But yeah, I heard that story you're talking about told over and over. Somebody's out just driving around aimlessly doing weird stuff. They're near federal buildings at 2 in the morning, looking suspicious. And the cops get upset, and I hear you people with your scanners making the beeping sound. 1, I can hear that 100 yards away. Yourself that you have that on it. 2, if you're someplace where the cops are slightly under-trained, the last thing that they're going to really want to hear that evening is the computerized voice going 45 meters from target.
Yeah.
You'll get the 3rd degree all for these headphones.
Yeah.
But it does, that whole folks who normally stay at home and don't get out much, that really brings out some of the worst kind of behavior you've ever seen.
Oh, I've played Ingress in multiple cities now. I played Arkansas, I played in Little Rock, I played in Minneapolis. I was up there for the Minotaur event. St. Louis, of course, Atlanta. And I see the same patterns over and over of the kind of people that are playing, and it does have a tendency to bring out some really aggressive behavior. And this kind of depersonalization of the other side, I see this happening over and over, blue and green. And it reminds me a lot of the experiment that was, I think, at Stanford University, where they took a bunch of students and just arbitrarily said, okay, you are prisoners, you are guards, and put them in. And very rapidly, these students started internalizing what they were, and it started having very negative ramifications on them. And I'm seeing that over and over and over again in Ingress.
Shut that down because it got out of control.
It did. And with Ingress, I see it bringing out some of those traits. I've talked to people that are on the blue team, and they just start saying all greens are bad. I don't trust those green players, frogs. And the green players saying, oh, blue, Smurfs, I don't trust any Smurfs. And it's a little scary. And I've tried to have people kind of think of the thought experiment. Well, what if you had to work together for some common goal, and so you're on blue. What if you had to pick 2 green players to work with to achieve some goal? And I've seen blues, I wouldn't want to work with any of them. And it's difficult for me to think of any game that has brought out that kind of, I hate all of them with a capital T, those people.
But there's a flip side to that, and that we have cross-faction meetups and dinners and lunches here. Well,
In Tennessee?
Yeah, Tennessee. And I met the last person that we hired in my business through Ingress.
Huh, cool.
And a cross-faction person, had a breakdown on the side of the road out in the country chasing a portal, and some other person from the other team came and gave him a jack. And
Okay.
I mean, so there's a positive side to it as well.
I've seen that in some areas, and it depends. Like in Canada, I hear that there's a lot of cross-action. They work together really, really well. In Minneapolis, absolutely not. Oh, there's so much hatred. It was scary. In St. Louis, I once suggested, how about we have a cross-action, just a barbecue, just get everybody come, and there's food, and they said, no, I don't want to hang around those people. And which is weird. I mean, like any other Settlers of Catan or something, you play it. You have an opponent, but you don't take it out on someone personally like that. Whereas in Atlanta, there's some good stories. There's actually a guy who switched factions so he could date a girl in the other faction. And that was kind of his way of flirting, was he switched factions and then got a screenshot of his phone to show that he was the different color and then sent it to her. And then he started dating after that, so it's kind of cute. Okay. Any other Ingress stories? All right. I talked about that. Anyone who wants to play, it is still technically in closed beta, but if you want to get in, just go to ingress.com/invite.
I got 5 if you need some.
Yeah, and I have 10 codes, and they're generally approving them in a few hours at this point. I got to meet the guys who were running the company at Minneapolis at Minotaur, and because I'm in the game industry and I'm a community manager, we had some long talks about community and just the way the game was being structured. And I was really leaning on them pretty hard about this antagonism between the factions. And I was saying, you need to come up with something that gives people a common goal, because otherwise, if they're only seeing people as the enemy, it's never going to change. But if they have something like, oh, maybe this person's going to be useful to me in some way, then that's going to start changing things psychologically. And the very next Ingress report, Suzanne Moore started talking about cross-action meetups and everything. So I hope that they add that to the game. And it's still a very dynamic game. They're doing software updates pretty much, once a week or at least a few times a month. So it's definitely not a static game. Yes.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes,
been
Dagmar.
Something that we've noted is sort of a problem. It's gotten a little out of hand at Nashville, and when I started introducing Nashville 3600 players in the game, I had a very simple and very clear statement to make. We are hackers. We're a little hardcore with technology. If you're playing Ingress, no cheating. Because any given one of us has the capability to break the fucking game.
Yeah,
This
cheating is
is
a
a game that
big
gets people out of
problem.
the house, gets exercise. That's a good thing. Don't ruin everyone's fun. Cheating in a Quake match between you and your buddies is one thing, but Ingress, if you see your other people using BMod or any other, cut it out, man. Get your fat ass on the street and walk the blocks.
Yeah.
But no cheating. We'll ruin the game.
And it does. I was working, and just to repeat for the recording, Dagmar was talking about how trying to encourage people, especially hackers who are playing Ingress, to not cheat, because it really ruins the game. And I've seen that too. There was
I mean, we could ruin. Three of us could turn all of Nashville green indefinitely.
yeah, there was
The
a,
guys who are cheating are fucking amateurs at it. If us got involved in it, we would ruin the game.
in Russia, there was a group of hackers, I think in the city of Minsk, and they set up a botnet, which was basically auto players that were going through of one color and going through and just attack a portal, take it over, go to the next portal, take it over, take it over. The entire city turned, I think it was blue, I'm not sure, but the city was controlled, and the other players on the other side, like, screw it, why bother playing? And I'm with you, Dagmar. I'm like, I have enough games that keep me on the couch, at my desk. I want a game that gets me off the couch, going out, walking around, seeing things, and these people that are cheating are like, what, you're trying to get me back on the couch to use a cheat program? No, that it kind of defeats the whole point. So I just thought I'd mention that Ingress did get mentioned on XKCD a while ago. I won't read you the whole thing, but it's basically some people inviting themselves over to a guy's house. He's like, why am I so popular? It's because his house was near a bunch of portals. So, all right. So here's another game, and I just heard about this at DragonCon. Someone came up and told me about it after my talk. I didn't mention it, and I'm like, oh, I like it, and now I'm playing it all the time. It's called Strut. And what it is it keeps track of where you go. So you start off with a map where everything's dark in a city, and as you walk a street in that city, it lights up that area. And so it encourages you to explore all these little nooks and crannies of a city. It's great when I'm driving, like all the interstates are all lit up because I've driven down all the interstates. But I can see that this is going to get me on bike trails and going out into different areas. Anyone here a Strut player or high score list or anything? Okay, all right. This is another location-based game. This tends to be associated with geocaching, though it's not geocaching. Specifically, it's Munzie. And they're doing this with QR codes. So they will hang a tag like this somewhere, and then you use your phone, you have a Munzie app, and you scan it, and then you get a point for it. And then if you want to place it, you can print out a bunch of QR codes and hide them in different places, and then activate it again with your phone. Say this QR code is in this location. So you can get points for placing Munzies and points for finding Munzies. I first ran into them with geocaching because people who are Munzie players are usually also geocachers, and it can help to find it. If I'm looking for a cache and I'm not finding it, then I find a Munzie, I know the cache has got to be close. So, yes?
Are you familiar with the OpenStreetMap project?
OpenStreetMap, I've heard of it.
I've
Yes.
been participating in that for a couple of years. It's a worldwide project to try to make improved maps.
Open source maps. It's an open source Google Maps.
Open source. It's not just the maps, but the data back end, which can be used for many purposes. Open source and it's all the way from people who are simply tracing roads down to people who are doing really detailed about this individual shops and building outlines and things like that.
Yeah. Another thing I'm finding really useful is, like, if you go to a website called gpsfiledepot.com, and people are mapping trails, which I find great if you're in this, like, really big park area and you're not quite sure where the trails are. Someone will have gone through and they've done, like, little waypoint stamps on some trail, and then they've uploaded it, and then you can download these trail maps to your GPS. So you can, if you're lost or something, I can just tap and say, oh, look, there's going to be a trail 50 feet that way. And I don't have to be in cell phone access. All I need is Sky to get some sort of a satellite lock, and I've used it many, many times. So yeah, that people are kind of open sourcing all these locations is awesome. I think it's fantastic. So going into geocaching in a little more detail, there's many different sites that have caches. There's open caching, and they each kind of maintain their own database. But really the big one on the block is geocaching.com. So that's where I'm going to be spending most of my time talking about it. It's run by a company called Groundspeak out of Seattle. There are, on geocaching.com, over 2 million geocaches around the world right now. We're currently at 2.2 million geocaches, over 5 million people playing the game. And you can go to geocaching.com and you can pull up a map of it. You say, this is Murfreesboro here. And each one of these little icons here is a cache. You can see someone did what's called geo art over to the east there. They actually made a little picture of a car by placing caches and locations to draw the outline of this little VW bug out there. So you can go to any one of those caches and it'll say, to find this cache you need to solve this puzzle and go to this location. So the only way to see this bug is on geocaching.com, but people have done art with an eagle. There's one in Idaho where they took an area of desert that's many, many miles across, did a full picture of a train that's like chugging along. And it's just another thing that people are doing with locations here. So this is an example of a cache page. This is a cache that I placed in Illinois. Is my mouse? Yeah. So a cache will have a name. In this case, it was near a convention center, so I called it Meeting of the Minds. It'll have a difficulty and a terrain. The difficulty will be on a scale of 1 through 5, and the terrain will be on a scale of 1 to 5, giving an idea of how much effort is going to be required to get to this cache. So a terrain 1 means very simple, wheelchair accessible, literally. Someone in a wheelchair could get to this cache. Terrain 2, and people will kind of debate exactly what terrain 2 is, but generally it means not wheelchair accessible, but say someone with small children, a stroller, a really determined stroller mom could get to this cache. It was terrain 2. Terrain 3, you're probably going to be like pushing leaves out of the way, maybe doing some bushwhacking. Terrain 4, you need to be prepared for being outdoors, have some supplies. You probably don't want to be taking little kids on a terrain 4. Terrain 5, you need special equipment. You're going to need scuba gear. You're going to need rappelling gear. You're going to need a kayak. There's a cache on the space station that was placed by Richard Garriott, Lord British. So that's a terrain 5. You need you need a rocket around you.
Rob for the win!
Difficulty 1 through 5, same thing. Difficulty 1 means the cache, it's in pretty much plain sight. Terrain 2 means an experienced cacher could find it within a half hour of searching. Half hour is actually a lot. If it really took a half hour, I'd probably bump it up to 2.5 or 3. And then they go up. So the difficulty 5 is something serious mental effort. And there's some really interesting puzzle caches that are coming up in the geocaching scene that are ciphers and codes that you have to solve. If we have time, I'm going to show you one that was created by someone, I think in Murfreesboro, that's a very techie, he's obviously a computer hacker, because you need to be able to go and telnet somewhere, and you need to be able to go in and look at HTML source in order to get the coordinates in order to find the cache. But when I go to an area, what I'll generally do is I'll get a list of the caches that are in that area, and then I'll sort by what's called favorite points. And over here where this little blue ribbon is, you can sort on any of these columns, but the blue ribbon is someone who's a paying member of geocaching.com, and most people are, it's cheap, it's like $35 a year. But if you're a premium member, you get, for every 10 caches you find, you get a favorite point. And you can assign that favorite point to a cache that you found. And then it's very useful to kind of sort by all the caches in an area by which have the most favorite points. And caches that are rocking it are going to have hundreds of favorite points, and they're usually worth seeing. So earlier today I was geocaching, and I did the same thing. I said, what's the highest favorite point cache in Murfreesboro? And it's a cache near the library, and you start at coordinates, and then it says, okay, turn to 90 degrees and go 36 paces, and then turn to this and go 4 paces, go through this door. And what it's directing you into the library near Town Square, and it directs you to a specific shelf, and one of the books on the shelf is a fake book. And you open it up, and inside there's a logbook, and you get to sign the logbook, you close, you put the book back on the shelf. Now, they have the permission of the library and all this. So anyone who wants to do it, I highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. And if you go and you can look through these logbooks, you can see signatures going back years of people that have gone and found these caches and signed their name and they put it back. Now, you may not have noticed people looking for caches because a certain amount of stealth is a good idea. You don't want, say if there's a bunch of kids in the area and they see you like pulling a box from under a tree and signing and putting it back, those kids are going to go straight for, what is that? And they're not going to know that they're supposed to leave it there. They're going to take it home, especially if there's toys in it. So there's a word for this in the geocaching community. So geocaching started becoming popular right around the same time that Harry Potter started becoming popular. So the word among geocachers is, don't let the muggles see you. So if a cache disappears, the word is, it's been muggled. And so, and it happens, caches disappear all the time. But a kid may have found it, maybe a cop saw it, didn't know what it was, and they took it. Maybe an animal dragged it off because they smelled something. You never want to put food in a cache. Like this swapping toys, some people think, oh, I'll put in a piece of candy or something. Don't put food in a cache, because if there's a box out there with food in it, animals are going to come to that box and they're going to chew it up or they're going to drag it away. Also, anything you put in a cache, be aware that geocaching is a family activity. Don't put anything in a cache that you wouldn't want a 3-year-old to see. right? So nothing, don't put, hypodermic needles, don't put knives into a cache, don't put guns, don't put fireworks, don't put, adult explosives, adult materials. And that's the rule of thumb I have. If I open a cache and I see stuff in there, especially if you're in Nevada, people put in those cards, that they hand out on the street in Nevada. I think, would I want a 3-year-old seeing this? If no, boom, I take it out of the cache. I may not be trading, I'm just taking it out of the cache. I'll take out food, I've taken out knives, I've taken out all kinds of weird stuff from caches. So, now a cache, there can be many different types of caches. This goes back to what you were saying earlier about virtual caches. The standard kind of cache is a traditional cache, which means it's a box, it's got a logbook inside of it. It could be the size of a shoebox, an ammo can, pill bottle. All of these are traditional caches. Even if it's really big, there's a cache in Delaware called Your Key to Cache, which is, you go to the coordinates and you find a small container, it's about the size of a pop can that's in a chain link fence. You open it up and in the can is a key, and it says, with a little tag on it, it says, use the side door. And you're in a parking lot, and there's one of these big vans, like a heating, ventilation, air conditioning van, and you take the key and you open the side door, and the light comes on, and it's like a little Hobbit villa in there. The entire van is the cache. They did this as like a memorial to someone. So there's like a little writing desk with a logbook, and there's a little box where people can put swag to trade, and it's just amazing. So as big as that thing is, though, it's still a traditional cache. It's an object. Now, a multi-cache is one where when you go to the coordinates that are on the cache page, you're only getting a clue to where either the cache is or your next clue is going to be. These could have as many as 10 different hops for a multi-cache. Virtual cache, as he described, there won't be a physical object, but you may need to get information of some kind. So again, I did a virtual cache earlier today at Town Square, where, I don't know if anyone was there, there was some sort of car show going on there today with vintage cars, but I had to walk around and find certain historical plaques and find some, like, answer a question, what was here from 1816 to 1823? And I was like, oh, this was the state capitol. And so you learn more about an area. Virtual caches usually have a coolness factor. Puzzle and mystery caches, those might have ciphers, codes, trivia questions to answer, jigsaw puzzle to solve. The sky's the limit. Anybody can place a cache. Anybody can become what's called a CO, a cache owner. There's a certain review process. There's reviewers, usually 2 or 3 per state, that will check a cache to make sure there's nothing really stupid in it, like someone didn't put it on a railroad track or in the middle of an interstate highway or in the middle of an elementary school, because the last thing you want is a bunch of people kind of wandering around an elementary school, looking for something. But as long as you follow certain basic rules about where a cache should be, and it can't be too close to another cache. It has to be at least 1/10 of a mile apart, 528 feet apart, which usually isn't a problem. Sometimes they'll set up what's called a power trail, so they'll set up like a road where caches are like every 1/10 of a mile, and people will race to see how many caches they can find in a certain period of time. Event caches is a gathering. Earth cache, it's like a virtual cache, but you're learning something about geology. Again, I found an earth cache today at Murphy Spring. Is an earth cache, and I had to go there and read the plaques and get some information. Usually do some sort of an observation of the geology of the area. I had to learn a little bit about limestone and what kind of limestone was at Murphy Spring. Wherego, and I could talk all day about wheregos. These are it's where geocaches intersect with computer games. And I've written a few that are like RPGs that you're going from point A to point B, and where you are changes the rules, changes how the game is played. So I wrote one in St. Louis called Where My Zombie Go, as part of a team, where it says to start, you go to this location, and you go to that location, and it says, okay, it looks like you're in a hotel parking lot, but actually this is a hospital that's been overrun by zombies, and your goal is to find patient 0 to stop the zombie plague. To find patient 0, you need to go find Dr. So-and-so, who was last seen 700 feet that way. And so you have to go, and when you get there, then the phone will go, and it says, you're being attacked by a zombie, what do you do? And then you have to decide, you're going to attack the zombie or you're going to run away. And so you go through and play the game and eventually, find the vaccine and stop the zombie plague. And these Wherego cartridges, game files, they're called cartridges, they're all over the place. And again, I did one of these today that was in a bell buckle I drove down there where I had to go somewhere, and again, go to a place that showed me a photograph. I need to figure out where the photograph was and get some information, enter it in the device, and then it would give me the clue to the next spot. And then letterboxes, I already talked about letterboxes. Right. So this is an example of a puzzle cache in St. Louis, and I know this guy has also placed caches in Murfreesboro, but this particular one is in St. Louis. The name of the cache is just 25. And the guy's name is Gary Brayman. Does anyone know? Okay. So this is the only clue on the cache page, and that the name of the cache is 25. Well, some of you may recognize the stamp. It's a very famous stamp of an upside-down airplane. Though, if you look at on the right is the actual stamp, and the one on the left is the one on the cache page. So you can see that the amount is different. The actual stamp is 24 cents, and the stamp is 25 cents. And again, the cache is named 25. So at this point, I was going in, I was looking at the HTML source and seeing what was going on. And I don't know if you can see this, but I was looking at the image info. I could see that the URL for the stamp, it was not being hosted on Groundspeak. It was being hosted at smtp.showmeit.com/elo, EHLO/25.jpg. So anyone that knows mail protocol knows SMTP is mail protocol, and EHLO is also mail protocol, and that it was showmeit.com was also very interesting. And then the cache page had coordinates also. Where it said the cache is not at these coordinates, but where did those coordinates point? So I went and I looked at Google Maps, and I saw that the coordinates pointed to a mailbox. So again, there's this theme of mail and mail. So long story short, went in, got in, I don't know if you can even see that, but I went in and I telnetted to smtp.showmeit.com, port 25, okay? And I got this really interesting long response string back. And those of you that recognize this response string may realize that this is not a normal part of a response string in this case. This was a phone number with an extension. So I could call it here, but you call it and you get a recording, and the recording says, congratulations. Now what you need to do is send an email to, and it gives you another address that you have to write to. It's 25 and with the geocaching, and then it gives you the actual latitude, longitude coordinates. Then you go to where the coordinates are, and it's an area kind of down and it's at the base of one of those large advertising signs near a highway where there's a chain link fence. Well, you know the posts for those chain link fences, sometimes the caps are welded on and sometimes not. So in this case, took the cap off and it's hollow. Well, the cache is at the bottom of the post, and there's a little stream nearby, so you need to get a bucket, fill it with water from the stream, pour the water into the fence post to get the cache to float up to the top, and then you can finally open it and sign the log. Oh my God. So he's, Gary, this guy, Fried Okra, has done other caches like this that require web pages refreshing at a certain time. He's done caches where he's hidden things in the Whois directory, the domain registry for a particular thing, and it's just a lot of really geeky puzzles. So, go ahead.
Have there ever been any caches that intersect geocaching and ham radio? It sounds like there would be.
Yes, I don't know of any specific caches that intersect geocaching and ham radio, but I know many geocachers who are ham radio operators, and that'll be their handle. There's one in Missouri where his handle is N0WNV, which is his ham call sign, and I've seen other geocachers where they've got the license plates for ham radio. Yeah. But it needs to be, if somebody's making a puzzle cache, it generally needs to be within the realm of an amateur to solve, like a really bright high school student could solve this. This one that I showed you with Gary Brayman, that's like really high level. As a matter of fact, I think that goes a little farther, because a lot of people wouldn't have no clue how to telnet, or even if they knew they needed to telnet, they wouldn't even have the tools in order to be able to do it. So, but if somebody wants to make a cache with ham radio, I'd say go for it. Some caches, and these qualify as puzzle caches, but they're a subcategory of puzzle cache called a challenge cache. And a challenge cache might be something like find 25 caches in a single day before you can log this one, or find 7 different types of cash. So today when I was caching, I was trying to get as many types of caches in one day. I got a virtual cache, I got a puzzle cache, I got a where-ago, I got an earth cache, and I got a traditional cache, and I got one of that. I got 6 different types of caches in one day, which would qualify me for a challenge somewhere. I don't know which challenge, but I thought it was cool to get those different types. Some of you may be familiar with these kinds of maps called the Delorme maps. And there's usually one of these, there is one of these for every state. So it's called the Delorme Challenge, and to my knowledge, every state has it, is to find a cache on every page of the Delorme map. Page 25, page 26, page 27. It's fun. And people will do this, and then there will usually be 1 or 2 challenge caches in that state. I think has anyone done the Tennessee Delorme Challenge here or know where the challenge cache is? I'm thinking that it's over east of Knoxville, but I'm not sure. There's also something called the Jasmer Challenge, which is to find a cache that has been placed in every month since geocaching began. Geocaching started in May 2000. So to find a cache that was placed in May 2000, to find a cache that was placed in June 2000, July 2000, August 2000. It's considered one of the premier challenges in geocaching is to complete the Jasmer Challenge. Jasmer is the name of the cacher that came up with it in California. And it's getting difficult because caches don't last forever. They get muggled, the cache owner decides they don't want to be geocaching anymore, they're sick of it, or maybe permission is withdrawn, someone doesn't want that cache hidden in that area anymore. So for some of those months, there's no more than maybe a half a dozen caches placed in, I think August 2000 left in the world. So you really have to travel if you want to complete Jasmer. Another one is called the Fizzy Challenge. This is another one of the premier challenges. Remember when I was talking about difficulty and terrain, difficulty 1 through 5, terrain 1 through 5. So you end up with a grid, and it's not just 1 through 5, it could be 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. So you have 81 blocks in the grid. A cache could be a 1, 1, or a 2.5, 4.5, all these. And the challenge is to find at least 1 cache for every block in the grid, which is said to be completing the Fizzy Challenge. It's called Fizzy because when geocaching first started, there was a cacher named Fizzy Magic who was writing the utilities to filter caches and find the difficulty terrain combinations. He was called Fizzy Magic, by the way, because he was a physicist and a magician. So Fizzy Magic, and now and then the challenge was named after him, so he's called the Fizzy, or the well-rounded challenge. There's a lot of status of completing the Fizzy Challenge. I'm currently, I've completed the Jasmer, and I'm 2 blocks away from completing the Fizzy. I need to find a cache that's a difficulty 1, terrain 4.5, and a difficulty 2.5, terrain 4.5. And one of the reasons I'm here in Tennessee right now is because I can find both of these in Jackson. And I was going to go there yesterday, but it was pouring rain, so I'm going to go there tomorrow. I'm going to finish my Fizzy. Cache Across America is another big challenge where you have to find a cache in every state, but not just a cache in every state, a specific cache in every state. So there's 50 caches plus the final cache, which is in Washington, D.C. The Tennessee cache is it's a bit northwest of here, I think. There's a park southwest of Nashville where the cache is. The Missouri cache is in central Missouri at where Walt Disney's childhood home is. It's again just a challenge. So if you are into geocaching and into challenges, these 3 challenges specifically, the Jasmer, the Fizzy, and Cache Across America, are those you want to be aware of, because it really sucks to visit Maryland and then go away, oh, I was right next to the Cache Across America Maryland cache, or I was right next to a June 2000 cache. These are caches you don't want to miss if you have a chance. And I told you about Delorme, and then other county. Not just find a cache on every page of the Delorme, find a cache in every county in Tennessee, which is really going to have you exploring the state, let me tell you. Terrain difficulty, I already told you about. Yeah, I already told you about that. Speaking of cache, I could go into more detail about, most people are smartphone caching these days. There's sort of a controversy, old school cachers, smartphone, I never use a smartphone, I use a GPS. And then there's people even before, I never use GPS, I use paper maps. And so they'll kind of argue about these. But in general, smart people are more and more often are smartphone caching, which works if you're in an urban environment. because you have that cell phone access. Or, I mean, sometimes the Android devices will have a GPS chip built in, so even if you're not within cell phone range or Wi-Fi range, you can still figure out where you are. I generally have both. I usually use my smartphone, but there's areas, like when I was down in Bell Buckle, on the way, no service. So it's good to have an extra GPS as a backup. General rule is you always want to have multiple forms of navigation. Never have just one form of navigation with you. Because even if it's the greatest iPhone in the world, you could drop it, the battery could die, you could drop it in a river. Just all sorts of things happen. So always try to carry multiple forms. Also, and puzzle caches will do this sometimes, is there are different ways of representing latitude and longitude. You could do it decimally. You could do it with UTM, which is a completely different system. So it's something else to be aware of if you're working on a puzzle cache, is just what kinds of coordinates that they may have represented. The general rule is it's going to be like north 38 degrees, 40 point, and then something after that. That's generally what geocaching.com uses. GSAC, I could and do teach classes on GSAC. This is a very powerful database program called Geocaching Swiss Army Knife, which lets you download thousands of caches from the Groundspeak site to your own computer and then filter them and do regex queries and all kinds of interesting ways of manipulating the data, which is especially useful if you're doing a challenge. A challenge might be find a cache that starts with every letter of the alphabet. And so you might want to look for something like, how many caches are there near me that start with the letter M, that are within 50 miles, that are difficulty lower than 3, and so you can write some really, really interesting queries that way. If you're looking for a cache, I'll just say, you go to the area that your coordinates point to, which is going to be called GZ, ground zero. At that point, put away your GPS, because even the best GPS is not, it's going to get you within maybe 20, 30 feet, and then you're thinking, okay, well, you've got the error on your phone or your GPS and the error on whoever placed it. Did they get accurate coordinates when they placed the cache? So even if you're saying it's 0 feet away, you're still going to be searching probably in a 30 or 40 foot diameter area. And then look for something that's out of the ordinary. The most common cache, especially in an area where there's some sort of shrubberies or trees, is look for a pile of sticks. And the cache will usually be under the sticks, a suspicious pile of sticks or of rocks. But don't just look at the ground, look up. Caches are often in trees, attached to branches. Sometimes they're camouflaged, so it might be a fake pine cone. Lots of different ways to hide a cache. Stumps. A cache that gets a lot of controversy is what's called an LPC, which is a lamppost cache. Pretty much any Walmart you go to, the lampposts, there's a skirt at the bottom of the lamppost and it's not screwed down. So if you lift that skirt, there's usually a place to put a cache under there. It's an easy place to hide a cache, but a lot of people hate it because it doesn't have a lot of creativity. It's fun like the first time you find one, and then after you found your 10th or 15th LPC, they get really boring. GRC, same thing, guardrail caches. People will put like a hidey key in a guardrail. It is not legal to put a cache in a guardrail on an interstate, though if you're like in a parking lot behind a Walmart, it's a legal place to have a cache. Caches should always have permission. They should always have permission. They don't always have permission, but they should always have permission from the property owner. And if you're ever in an area and you find a cache and someone says, that's on my land, I didn't get permission for that, just take the cache away. Don't even argue with them, because it's their land. What?
Muggle it.
Muggle it. Yeah. Right?
And if it's something like a stack of rocks out in the country, just watch out for snakes because they also like stacks of rocks.
Yeah. And there's danger. People have died geocaching. They've died because they ran into the wrong kind of animal. They've died because they fell. That happens a lot. Because they're looking at their GPS and they're not paying attention to where they're going and they just walked right off a cliff. Or if someone has a heart attack. You're out in the middle of nowhere. So it's a good idea to let people know where you're going when you can. So these are some common acronyms you may hear. TFTC, people often sign a log, you just say TFC. Say TFC, thanks for the cache. This is generally the mark of a new geocacher. More experienced cachers, especially after you've placed a cache, will know that the proper etiquette is really to post a good log. Because a log is your way of thanking the cache owner for placing a cache. it gives them some feedback, it continues the story. So if I could give one piece of advice to a new cashier is write good logs. Sometimes you're in a hurry, you put TFTC, you can always go back later and just write a more expanded log. TNLN took nothing, left nothing, SL, sign log. DNF, did not find. Some people are embarrassed to put DNFs, and I say no. If you don't find a cache, post what's called a DNF, a did not find log. It serves many purposes. It tells the cache owner that the cache may have been muggled. Perhaps they have the difficulty set too low. There's a lot of good reasons to post a DNF. CTO is a type of event called cache in, trash out, when cachers will get together and they'll clean up an area. They'll bring trash bags or they'll distribute trash bags, and no one can find trash like a geocacher. Because you're out in the woods and you're looking at anything man-made you see, and it feels really good to pick this stuff up, and it also makes the caches easier to find when the beer cans are gone. PAF, PAF, phone a friend. If you don't find a cache, it's perfectly fine to call a friend of yours that's already found the cache and say, yo, give me a hint, where is it? Everyone plays the game in a different way, and that's another important takeaway about geocaching is nobody plays it the same way. Some people want to be very strict. They never want to ask for a hint. They're very strict about logging. And other people, it's much more casual. One controversy might be if there's a high terrain cache, say there's something that's up a cliff. Some people might say, you're not allowed to log that cache unless you personally climb up that cliff and find that cache. And other people will say, look, I was with a group of 10 people. We got this spry young guy here. He went up there and got the cache, brought it down. We all signed it. It's all good. I'm of the group caching is okay category. I'm perfectly fine to let someone else go and do the climbing. And FDF, this is a whole nother level of play. Sort of like with Ingress, where people get really into playing. The people that are really into geocaching are often very much into first to find. When a cache is published, their phone dings and it says it's a mile away, and they will race to see who can be the first person to find that cache. There's people who will say, I've got 100 FTFs, or I've got 200 FTFs. They will break speed limits, they will run through private property, they want that FTF. I've got a few FTFs, usually on puzzle caches, because no one else found it in 4 days, and then I finally solved the puzzle and went in and got the cache. But some people are really aggressive about FTF. It's called being an FTF hound. Puzzle caches, I won't go into a lot of them, but they're all over the place. It could be ciphers, it could be some sort of a classic puzzle, a Sudoku puzzle, it could be the techie puzzles like I showed you, mathematics, it could be images. So like here, there's a story on this cache page that says the clue is here, and I don't know if you can, I don't know if you can see it on here, but way up here they modified the image, so right there it says something like B equals 6 or something, and it gives you, and there's a little clue there, and there's another little clue down there, and this one is a mathematical puzzle. You have to get certain numbers and then put them into the formula to figure it out. This was someone, this person wrote the cache for me. They put on the cache page, I wrote this for you, Elonka. Great, thanks. And it was hundreds of lines of square waves. And I looked at it and I knew what it was, is that it was binary. And what they did is they put the ones and zeros in square root. It was 3,000 bits there. There was no way I was going to sit down and by hand transcribe 3,000 bits. So I was telling everyone else in the geocaching community, I found somebody else who was willing to sit and transcribe it. And it was I think it was 8-bit ASCII. And then they asked me to go along with them to find it. So I still got first to find on it anyway, without doing the hard work. This is one in Indianapolis, and it's not going to show up there. But the coordinates are here, and what you need to do is you need to pull this into an image program and then change the hue on one of this, and it's steganography. The coordinates are actually there in the crystal ball. It's just in a color that's 1 bit off from the rest of the colors there. There's also gadget caches. West Virginia has a lot of gadget caches where one cache says, you will not be able to solve this cache if you are walking. You will not be able to find this cache if you are riding a bicycle or a motorcycle. You need a car. And you need a tool that most people have in their cars. And what it is you need to pull up to the cache and you need to get your jumper cables out and connect your battery and connect it to the posts on the cache, which then opens the box and then you can get the log out of it from there. There's a cache that's underwater and just has a hose coming out. You need to bring a bicycle pump, and you need to pump it, which inflates the balloon, which brings the cache up, a little submarine up to the top of the water. There's all kinds of little birdhouse caches around where you need to figure out, it's like a puzzle box, you need to figure out how to open the birdhouse. It's all kinds of things. Also, I know there was an NFC talk earlier today. There's starting to be caches showing up with NFC technology. So all you'll find is the little dot, and you need to have. I mean, my iPhone won't do it, but I have an Android now, and you need to, wave it to get coordinates that are then beamed to your device that tell you where the actual cache is. There's caches where you need to play like a musical tone and just all kinds of stuff. Trackables, I know I'm going over time now, but these are items, toys you can put in a cache that have a number on them. And then you enter that number so you can go online and you can see all the places that a particular item has gone, this trackable item. People will trade trackable items, and I won't go into great detail on that. So if you want to get involved with geocaching, join the community. You can get an account on geocaching.com for free. If you want to become a premium member, it's cheap. There's also groups on Facebook. There's probably a Tennessee geocacher group on Facebook, probably one on Google+. Make friends with other cachers, have your own cacher name. Also, for long drives, there's some wonderful podcasts for geocaching. Probably the most popular one is one called Podcaster. Comes out of San Diego. Husband and wife team named Sunny and Sandy. And once a week, they do this great podcast. Any place that geocaching was in the news, say if there was a bomb scare somewhere, somebody thought a geocache was a bomb, or just anything that's going on, they kind of announce it and talk about the good news stories. And it's fun to listen to when you're driving 150 miles to get a particular cache. For the more tech heads in here, there's a great podcast called Geo Gearheads that's talking about the different apps that are showing up on phones, and they'll compare different GPS technology and batteries. For Ingress, I was also going to mention, if you're going to play Ingress, you want an external battery because it eats your phone battery like nothing you've ever seen. And there's also massive events. There's events for geocachers that bring in hundreds of people. If it brings in some people, it's an event. If it brings in over 500 people, it's what's called a mega event, and you get an extra icon for that. There's actually going to be a mega event in my town, St. Charles, Missouri, next year called Geo Woodstock. Some of the debates, I think I mentioned them, these are the controversies of geocaching. One is called ALRs, additional logging requirements. Like if someone places a cache and says, in order to log this cache, there's a camera in the cache, you need to take a picture of yourself, and if you don't take a picture of yourself with that camera, I'm going to delete your log. And people were arguing about this. Was this a legal cache or not? And Groundspeak actually made a ruling saying this is what's called an ALR, an additional logging requirement. It is not required. The only thing you need to get credit for a cache is you need to find that log and you need to sign it, with the exception of some of the challenge caches, like the Delorme. But they can't make you take a picture of yourself. They can't make you, go out and move a rock in a certain way. Those are all ALRs, and those are all illegal. Virtual caches, they no longer allow people to place them. It stopped several years ago because people were submitting a lot of really dumb virtual caches, throwing a tennis shoe in the woods and saying, go find the tennis shoe and tell me what the brand is of the tennis shoe. Yes, it was a virtual cache, but it wasn't a very interesting virtual cache. So because it was causing so much angst, they said, okay, no more virtuals. Another controversy is an archive cache is a cache where the cache owner says, okay, I'm no longer maintaining this cache, I'm archiving it. It's done, it doesn't show up on the database anymore. But sometimes the container is still out there because it might be like way out, miles of hike, and they just didn't go and collect the container. Well, some people will still go and they'll find the cache and they sign the log and they go in and they log it online and they get a point for it. Some people say that's legit because the cache is still out there. Other people say no, it's not legit because the cache is archived. So it's a controversy. I mentioned about logging as part of a group. Does everyone have to climb up the cliff or not to go find that cache? Some people say yes, some say no. I told you about the smartphone versus GPS. And rating terrain and difficulty, there will be a lot of arguments about that. Is it a terrain 2? Is it a terrain 3? Some people, it's a 2, it's a 3. As long as it's somewhere close. Placing a cache, I don't need to go. I do recommend if you're going to place a cache, find at least 100 caches before you go placing a cache. It just gives you more of a feel for how stuff goes. Do's and don'ts, again, if you take something, leave something of equal or greater value. When posting a log online, please make it more than just TFTC. And also re-hide the cache as well or better than it was when you found it. And if the cache isn't there, and this is another controversy, some people say if the cache isn't there, they're sure it was smuggled, and they do what's called a throwdown. So they'll put a new cache container there. Say, well, I'm sure the old one was smuggled. Here, I'll help out, and I'll put a new container. Don't do that. Don't do that unless you've contacted the cache owner and said, I think it was smuggled. Is it okay if I put a new container there? But again, it's controversial. So, summary, location-based games, relatively new genre, but as smartphones get better and better, and as location techniques, GPS and whatnot, are also getting more and more accurate, more and more games are showing up. It's really opening things up to the public. Letterboxing, geocaching, ingress, all, it's usually free. It's another way to have fun and make new friends. All right, that's it. Thank you.